All right, everyone. So last, or not last class, but last time last week, we got into the basics of motion graphics or motion design, right? And we began using Adobe After Effects, and we got into the concept of keyframing. Okay, keyframing or having a key action or a key piece of data, usually like a position or rotation or a scale, allows us to do motion, like moving something across the page or rotating it or scaling it. So we're gonna just kind of start with that today, just kind of go over some basic stuff, and then we'll get into some newer concepts that we didn't really talk about before. So, let's talk about what is a keyframe. So, a keyframe, the way it's used in After Effects and the way it's used in a lot of animation program is it is a saved data point. Okay. So let's just say for the sake of argument, the action that we want to do is a car that moves across the page or the screen from the left side to the right side. Okay. Our beginning pose, oops, would be car at the right side, and the end pose would be car at, or sorry, I had it backwards. My bad. Car at the left side, car at the right side. Okay. Now, here in exercise one, I'm going to try to make this car go across the page. So how would I do that? Good question. Glad you asked it. So I got my car, and we talked about the idea that, like, okay, how do we know where this car exists in space? And we talked about the idea that in math, we have something called a coordinate plane. All right. So for instance, here at the center, this is 0, 0. If you go to the right, that's the x-axis. This would be 2, 0. This is the x value. The y value is the vertical value. This is 4, 0, 6, 0. This is 0, 2. This being the y value, 0, 4. Okay. And so if here's my car, this blue line represents my time marker. I can click on this car and move it around and set a position, or I can also click on the layer here. And what I'm going to do is hit the P for position, and you can see literally the number. Okay, this is my X value, this is my Y value. In this case, 95 means 95 pixels from the left side, or the X value. So that little thing here in the center, that's called our anchor point. That represents the center of our drawing. That is when they talk about 95, that's what they're talking about. It's 95 pixels from the left side, and it's about 249, excuse me, from the top. Okay. So you could position it either way. If I wanted to go a little bit to the right, I would take this value and kind of add to it as I just did. Or if I wanted it a little bit lower, this would be 0, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. I could lower this or raise this up. I'm going to put it about here at 250. Now, to save this point in space, I'm going to click on this stopwatch. That, excuse me, creates a keyframe, that little diamond shape there. Okay. Hopefully you've been seeing this. All right. And what I'm going to do is let's take this and I'm going to move it. So the way it works is once you've hit the stopwatch here, anything we do is now going to be keyframed. Okay. So if I'm going to put this at the 2 second mark, which is here, and if I were to take this and either use the selection tool to move this across or change the X value here to be a higher X value, which would be over on the right side, you can see what happens is it automatically makes a second keyframe. This is my beginning keyframe or my beginning pose. This is my um, end pose or end position. And then essentially, it's really all kind of math. If you think about it, if this is at 91 and this is at 360, or sorry, 632. So 632 minus 91, I think it was it something like that? Yeah, is 540, right? And then so my essentially what's going to happen is it's going to move my car 541 pixels over the 2 seconds. So divide that by two and it does out the math. So essentially my car is going to move 270 pixels per second. Okay. And if I hit play, there you go. Okay. My car starts at the left and it goes to the right, essentially based on math. You don't have to think about the math if that's too scary for you. But what's nice about keyframes is you can also update them. What I'm going to do is go over this keyframe, or another way to do this would be to use this left and right arrow here. Left goes to your last keyframe, hitting this goes to your next keyframe. I'm going to go to the first keyframe. You can tell you're over a keyframe because there's this little blue check mark there. And what I'm going to do is simply change the position. So by what I've done is I've updated the position from over here to over there. Now, if I were to play back, you can see it's changing the way that it moves. I can do that for this as well. So if I go here, I'm going to move this down. Okay. So at any point, you can always go and update your animation to different parts. So I updated the different keyframes here. Now that was working. There's different position properties that we can work with. So there's something called transform properties. We just talked about one of them. One of them is position. You can see that by if you go under this is the car layer here, card layer, car.png. I'm going to unfurl this and you can see that it says transform. And you can actually see the position, but there's actually other properties we can play around with. We talked about this last class, one called rotation and one called scale. So let's try that out as well. I'm going to open up exercise 2. If it says something like this, don't worry, just let it be changed. That's fine. I have this arrow. I'm going to unfurl this to the rotation. Now, when you rotate, just a reminder, it rotates with the idea that facing straight up is 0 degrees. This is 90 degrees. This is 180. This is 270. And if you were to do a full rotation, that would be a cool 360, give or take. Now, at the moment, my arrow is pointing to the right. That's its default because technically, I mean, the way I built this image is it's starting like that. I want to rotate it to be like that. Okay, so in other words, what I'm trying to do is a 90-degree rotation. So I'm just going to hit R for rotation. So once again, what are we trying to do here? We talked about, the concept of action. The action that I'm trying to do is arrow rotates, one-quarter turn or essentially 90 degrees. So it rotates from 0 degrees to 90 degrees. Okay. So what's my beginning pose would be, arrow at 0 degrees. And my end pose would be arrow at 90 degrees. So what I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to set it to 0. And this is my degrees. I can set this. I'm going to set this at 0. And I'm going to click on the stopwatch there. Once again, when you hit the stopwatch, what that does is it sets allows you to add keyframes. I can tell there's a keyframe, or, I can see the keyframe because it added a diamond shape there. And then I'm going to go to maybe like say 2 seconds, and I'm going to switch this, or turn this to 90 degrees. Because this was already on, it added a second keyframe. So this is my first data point, arrow at 0 degrees, and then at 2 seconds, arrow at 90 degrees. Once again, this is really just math. So in other words, what is my arrow doing? It's moving 90 degrees over time. It's taking 2 seconds. Or in other words, Adobe Animate knows it has to rotate my arrow 45 degrees per second. Okay. Now let's say rather than rotating a quarter turn, I wanted to rotate it 2 turns or 3 turns or 5 turns. Every time we have a turn, that's a full 360 degrees. Okay. The way we can mark that here is that this arrow or this number here, this is the number of rotations. This is full rotations, this is degrees. What I'm going to do is change this from 90 degrees to 2. What this means is that my arrow will now move or rotate 2 full rotations, which is about 720 degrees. Each rotation is 360. Take that times it by 2. Boom, you got 720. Okay. All right, that is rotation. So we've done position, we've done rotation. Let's do up the last one that we did last week, and that would be scale. As for scale, the way this works is rather than measuring pixels that we move or degrees, it's percentages of the original. So basically what you can do is take something and blow it up or shrink it down depending on its size. Um, this is the width, this is the height. Typically you like to keep these together, meaning the width and height are the same. So they keep the aspect ratio. 50% would mean half of its normal size. 100% is its default size. Every image or video has a default size, meaning the size when it was created in its program, like Photoshop or Photopea, or if it's a video, when you recorded it, it records at a particular dimension size, what that dimension is. So for instance, if this image is 200 by 100, that would mean 100% of this is 200 and 100% of this is 100. At this case, it's 50-50, which means, half of or 50% of 200 is 100 and half of 100 is 50. Hopefully that makes sense. So once again, I'm going to animate something. What is the action? Action is heart grows from small to large. I'm just going to keep it vague. You can do exact number, percentage numbers if you want. So the beginning pose, heart is small, end pose, heart is large. Okay. Um, Once again, take my time marker. I'm going to place it at the beginning and hit set the scale to where I want. You can use the selection tool to select If you want to scale it, hold out, click on the little gray boxes on the edge to do that. If you want to hold down Shift, that'll maintain aspect ratio or proportions between the two. And what I'm going to do is click on the stopwatch. That sets a keyframe, the little diamond. By the way, if you use other programs that do animation, like Adobe Animate or Premiere Pro or something like that, you will also notice these basic diamond shapes to represent keyframes. So it's not just After Effects, although After Effects was really one of the first to kind of do this. I'm going to make this larger by changing the scale from 40 to 200%. And there you go. Once again, what's really happening here is math. It was at 40% and it went to 200, so it basically increased 160%. It did it over 2 seconds, so 160 divided by 2. Or in other words, it increased 80% per second. Okay. All right, so I want you guys to try that out. This is just kind of review what we did in, last week, but I need you guys to kind of understand this basic concept because the whole idea of keyframing is something that is going to keep happening. Okay, whether we keyframe position, scale, rotation, we're going to get into other properties you can play around with, but these are all, you have to understand how to do very basic keyframing here. Okay, so try that out. That was 1, 2, and 3. Once again, just like in my, as per usual, I have instructions here that kind of explain, basics of like what I'm looking for. Oops, I don't know. All right.